Welcome to 50/50 Books, the book review podcast where the books are split in two, and figuring out just what is going on is always a toss-up. I'm Taylor.
And I'm Jonathan. For this spooky month, we're reading Lone Women by Victor LaValle, up to but not including chapter 36. Yeah, so happy spooky season.
Happy spooky season.
We have a bit of a horror historical fiction mashup.
Mm-hmm.
We have our main character, Adelaide, who is our titular lone woman. She grew up in California with her parents, all on a farm, and she was raised, actually working on that farm. So so Adelaide has bigger dreams, but is a bit held back by this family curse. She wants to be able to get out in the world, and so she finds out about this government program in her adulthood to be able to stake claim of land in Montana. However, that's not the very first thing that happens in this story, right? That's where she ends up. She actually starts off gassing her house with her parents in their bed, already not alive.
Yeah. Of course, when we're at the beginning of this book, we don't really know what happened. She kind of blames her parents, her mother, I think, in particular, and is like, it's because you were keeping secrets. So it's like, what's that about? And then obviously we have this mysterious trunk she's carrying that we don't know what that's about. So I feel like the assumption you get at first is she's just finding out about this trunk, but obviously that is not the case, as we come to learn. So there's still a lot, I think, going on in that family dynamic that's odd.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that the book kind of presents her, it kind of misrepresents her, I feel like, at the beginning as a sort of murderous intention person. And maybe because the author wants you to think that she's just murdered her parents, whether through the sort of final action of burning them or just before then. She talks about Mr. Cole, the first driver that she deals with, as like a potential target of murder. Like, just the thoughts that are going through her head are quite dark, I feel like, and that's not the character I think we get from her the rest of the book. I mean, skeptical for sure, but not so violent.
Yeah, I mean, it does follow through a little bit. Like, when the whole Matthew situation happens, she is briefly like, would it be such a bad thing if he died right now?
That's true. So
I think because of her having to deal with the trunk and like that kind of burden having been placed on her for so long, she does kind of deal with an ends justifying the means type of mindset, I think, because of her family. So, but yeah, we haven't seen her think about those things as much anymore, I guess, is a good way to put it.
Yeah, and maybe just because the setting is different. Like, we just start from them dying, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting, her relationship with her family in general it's got a bit of a tug and pull. She seems to be quite proud of being from her family, and like there's the whole thing of, oh, that family is, they're queer folk, right? She like doesn't seem to care, like kind of thinks about it as like a, whatever, like we are who we are, like we do what we have to do. But then on the other end is like quite unhappy, right? Like unhappy with the burden that's been placed upon her, and it feels like she talks about it as like a way of getting by as well. So, there's kind of both ends of the spectrum, but she carries that with her into the adulthood of like, she's used to being unusual. And like, especially when she's interacting with Grace's kid, Sam, like she seems to lean into that a little bit more.
And we should say like queer in the sense of being odd, like the actual definition of the word, not,
Yeah, definitely old school.
Yeah. Yes. Although we don't know, who can say?
That's true.
We're guessing here. Her family is described as like very isolated and like just close enough where they can kind of fade into the background. But yeah, that does kind of cause issues with every relationship she has after that. She's not used to those kinds of things. And she's also 31. Not that she needs a partner and she needs a family, but like she has only her parents. Like she didn't really have anybody else. So it's And supposedly she was going to stay on that farm and deal with that burden for like the rest of her life. So it's, how does that like stunt you as a person, right? Like,
yeah,
I don't, it's difficult.
Yeah, because she doesn't even have friends really, it seems like, and kind of the same way that the kid doesn't. Like she doesn't get the chance to have community because she's told to keep secrets. So the same thing that you mentioned earlier, she's kind of upset with her mother for, but like she was told like you have to keep this under wraps. Like you kind of have to be shameful about things. So yeah, I kind of think that's going to be like a major thread, is like the shame part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a weird situation she's in because she came from an environment where it was Black farmers. Like, that was the community they had built.
Mm-hmm.
And she still, because of her family, wasn't as integrated into that. And now she's in Montana, where
Right.
there were 2 other Black people and one of them is dead. So
Right.
she, like, notices that herself in the book. Like, yes, she gets along with Grace and she has something with Matthew, and like all of these people seem relatively fine, but as soon as she meets Birdie, it's like it's different, right? Because like that is somebody who will understand her in a way that these people will not.
Right.
Like that sense of community. But even with Birdie, there's still like isn't the opportunity to be as close as perhaps they could.
Yeah. There's kind of an immediate sense of distance there where like she's excited, right? And like, I don't know, it seems like Birdie just enters the situation and is just a part of the group, a part of the room, right?
Mhm.
But there's not actually a moment for connection quite yet. I mean, there's off-screen mention, if you will, of like her helping her with the loan and getting the horse and stuff, but nothing that like, you know, she's so concerned about being the one Black woman in this community up until then. It doesn't end up actually informing that interaction all that much, though, which I think is fine, but it almost sets it up like that's what's supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, she goes to Montana. Right. This is where she like travels with Mr. Cole and then takes a ship up to Seattle and then a train over to Montana, all that good stuff. The whole time with the steamer trunk, though. As we learn more about the steamer trunk, I kind of wonder why she bothered to bring it with her, but I guess my assumption throughout this book is just that she cares a lot about what happens to the creature, in that she doesn't care about the creature, but like its capability, and if she leaves it alone, like what it'll do. Because otherwise I'm like, why not just leave it behind in the burning house? But like, if she's afraid that the burning house won't kill it, and then it's just there, you know, who knows?
Yeah, feels like she needs to protect everybody else from it, which is like an understandable thought process, I suppose. But also throw it in the ocean, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, actually, not a bad idea. She was right there.
She was right there. She was on a boat.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. My thoughts too, though, are honestly like knowing more about the creature down the line. If she had left it there, I bet you it would have followed her.
Yeah, I don't know if it would have the capability, but I think if it did, it would follow her. Yeah.
Yeah, at least at some point. Yeah, that's a good point. But like, it obviously demonstrated an ability to get out of the trunk after being left alone long enough. So I'm like, it would have just busted out. It would have learned to fly there instead and just made its way to Montana. Yeah, so she's traveling out from Big Sandy with Mr. Olson and the Mudges. They stay at a sort of random set of rooms along the way, and the Mudges disappear in the night. So when she notices that they are gone, the first thing she does is check the trunk because she's like super anxious that they are gone because of something to do with the creature. And can you remind me, so was the lock affected at all?
I think it was still on the trunk, but it had obviously been like picked open.
Right.
And she thought it was the driver at first.
Right, because they have that little tiff, yeah.
And then, the Mudges are just gone.
So do we think they saw it? Like they opened it and saw it and it just like wasn't active at that time?
I mean, it makes noise, so it's possible they had gone to open it, and if they heard it breathing, then would you open it? I don't think so.
Maybe scurried off then. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
I will say, when we first meet the Mudges, though, this might have been a wild like claim for me, but I saw like 4 boys in blindfolds, apparently all blind. And I don't know why. I did not believe it at all. I was like...
That's bold.
I know. It's like maybe a bit too harsh, but I don't know. Like, so I guess it's just because of like it being a Western. I'm just not trusting of anybody because I understand people lied to steal all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I just like didn't believe them. And then I was like, I guess it doesn't matter because they're dead. And then, everything else happens. But
that is bold because for me, I really just thought, oh, like they're also just in a desperate situation. And like, I just thought with this idea of the lone women, it's like, oh, like she's coming out here because she like needs to start anew too. Like maybe they're hiding some secrets, which I guess they were. But like, I thought it was more of the same kind of story as opposed to like, oh, they're going to be like conning people,
Yeah, I just like have enough true crime knowledge where I know families that would like invite people in and then kill them and then bury them on the property.
Right.
So I'm like, oh, you can't really trust people out here.
Yeah. I am kind of curious why Adelaide thinks that the Mudges might have been dead, right? Because she thought like, oh, maybe like because they accessed the trunk, like they're gone forever. So did she assume that they had been, I guess, a couple of things. One, fully consumed with no blood left behind.
Mm-hmm.
And two, that the creature just got back in the trunk afterwards?
I guess that's easier for her to assume than the other possibility in which the Mudges disappeared without any of their belongings, right? Like,
Yeah. And I guess that's the big key point, right? They left everything behind.
yes, like her Occams is telling her this monster, like, creature devoured this family of 5.
Yeah.
That's how it works in her head. But yeah, it would be weird for the creature to, like, not leave anything behind and also lock itself back in the trunk, ?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's fine. It's also like at this point, we still don't know what the monster is. So we know people disappear because of the trunk, because of the description of this book. But for us, it could have just as easily been like a mysterious fog that consumes them and turns them into nothingness. Like,
Right.
we didn't know that there would be blood and gore left behind type of situation.
Yeah. I guess I find myself a little unsatisfied with some of the first parts of the book in hindsight, because they're definitely written with the convenience of knowledge you don't have yet.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as far as this, right? Like, now we know that there's the way that the creature behaves, and like presumably so does Adelaide, at least to some degree. So it doesn't make a lot of sense for her to believe this at this point in time, knowing what we know, at least at the midpoint of the book.
Yeah, it's definitely a point to help build suspense, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, retroactively, it falls a little bit flat.
Mm-hmm. I guess the last thing I'll say about these early parts is, like, you know, there's this focus on wanting something bigger and kind of starting over, not wanting to be stuck as the person she was when she was a part of her family and like the things that people knew about her family. But she doesn't do a great job of like leaving her past self behind. I mean, of course, by bringing the trunk. But like she gets to town and she's like, wow, like why isn't the newspaper man Fred like paying me any attention? But also like I probably shouldn't tell him anything about myself. So she's got this tussle of like, I want to start anew, but like I can't let go of myself.
I think the interesting thing about Adelaide's like basically contradiction is what you're talking about here is she does mention a lot how her family kind of raised her to be honest, which is why like she gives her real name to whoever she gets the land from for Montana.
Yeah.
Like she like does she does want to like reinvent herself, be somebody new, kind of move on, but she's just like too honest to do any of that, which I think is weird kind of when you think of her family. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if she had secrets, we can talk about whatever those might be, and then also her parents or her mother specifically had secrets, was it like the common situation in which the parents could keep secrets and it's just her that had to be completely honest? Like, maybe? Or was it they were honest with each other?
I mean, yeah, that's an interesting point. I think in part it's because she came to dislike the secret keeping, right? But yeah, you're kind of getting more at the point of her being raised in a certain way. I guess the other thing I'll bring up here is that they had the mention of the church and this kind of idea that, you know, it's a gathering of people who are claiming to do things like be honest, but really it's a performance. And so maybe it kind of comes down to that, right? Where she knows how to behave most of the time, right? But there's certain things that are a performance for her that are related to things like the creature as a secret.
With the way we ended with Grace, it'll be interesting to see like actual honesty and then maybe how that impacts the amount of shame and then also this creature, which I'm assuming is tied to shame in some way, like
right.
how that kind of changes. Because yeah, they're saying I'm being honest, but it's like, what are you being honest about? And also, are you actually, like, in a way that matters, right? Like, there's depth to honesty, and it's easy to give your name, but it's much less easy to be honest about actual aspects of yourself that matter, such as this burden, right?
100%. All right, so Adelaide gets to Montana. After a couple days, she gets a visit from her new neighbor, Grace, and her son, Sam. You had an observation here about them.
I just thought they had kind of vibes. Like,
yeah,
they were obviously eyeing each other up. I was like, sapphic relationship, maybe, but no, they just seem to be like kind of besties.
They're besties, yeah.
Yeah, which is fine. We love a
yeah.
platonic relationship with their child, which is kind of the direction we're maybe going in. I'm all for it, but
Yeah, I mean, I did not pick that up myself, but different reader, different result. So
Yeah. Also, I'm always looking, to be honest. I am always looking. I'm always looking for like queerness. So they just had to look at each other and I was like, "Oh, so dumb."
And it's like it's not out of the question, right? Even for like a historical fiction, right? Because we're in the fiction world, so anything can happen.
We also do get mention of like obviously like Grace and her husband came here together so they have a larger property, and we hear about women who will come and do this together. And it's like, are they good friends or
Were they roommates? Yeah.
Yeah, so
I caught that too. There was like a quick mention of it, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe that's the nod. But yeah, I'm not sure. I can't imagine that there's not any of that happening in this world.
it seems like the perfect opportunity, to be honest.
Honestly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, who's really gonna... No one seems to be batting an eye at it.
For sure.
No one's really batting an eye at anyone here, which I think is interesting. Like, no one's really... Like, I know that Adelaide is so afraid of being judged, right? Like, that's kind of part of the interaction that they have here is an anxiety of, like, Grace is, like, judging me to see if I'm, like, cut out for this, or, like, just whatever she assumes that Grace is forming opinions. But, like, truthfully, I feel like the wider community has been relatively accepting of everyone. Like, kind of Fred aside, because Fred is only welcoming to some people, it turns out. But, like, for the most part, the community seems like, yeah, like, the thing that happens here is new people show up, and we welcome new people. So
I do think they mentioned somewhere that I think it's like the driver in the beginning who mentions it's not really like Black people that have a problem out west, which easy for him to say. He lives in the middle of nowhere, but we don't need to talk about it.
yeah.
The real like racial issues tend to lean towards like the Asian community.
Yeah. No, and we see it right before the end of the first half where that one character, Miss Wong, like, definitely mistreated, or at least the way he talks about her.
But yeah, for Adelaide, it seems pretty chill, but obviously there's still like racist issues moving. Like, people won't help her move her trunk, and they like obviously look at her a certain way. Like, there's those slights, but I guess she's a lot more worried coming from a completely Black community to now a mostly white community. She's obviously nervous about what that experience might be like, but it does seem okay.
Yeah. There's some ways we'll never know too, right? Like, there's some behaviors she has that are to protect herself.
Yeah.
For example, when they stay over during the dance, she's like, yeah, maybe not a good idea for me to, like, snoop around the house as the one Black person here. Like, that could be really taken the wrong way. We don't actually get to see what happens when she does that, so we actually don't know where, like, the line is. Like, I wouldn't be that surprised if there was a certain point where, like, that stuff starts coming out, right? Like, someone gets rubbed the wrong way, and now suddenly the things that they've been holding back come out. We only get to see, maybe again on the performance conversation, we only get to see what people give. So
yeah, and obviously we're gonna have her kind of, we haven't talked about this a lot, but like versus the Mudges, what they have going on. I was very concerned, especially when she was first approaching Morrison, Mudge, whoever, just like a white woman versus a Black woman. I was very nervous about what was going to happen there. And that's still like a possibility, like a white family versus this Black woman could be, No,
that's true. What else? Other folks continue to visit Adelaide that are in the area. One of them, well, I guess it's two of them, Matthew and Finn, but one of them who Adelaide ends up in a little hookup situation with. That one turns real sour real quick. She's obviously still pretty protective of the trunk, but she seems to let her guard down after that dance. And it's like, yeah, like, I'll go home with Matthew and, like, he'll help, like, protect me if he's here during the night, so, like, that's a good idea. But, like, she totally seems to forget that the trunk is a thing that she needs to be watching out for. And so he opens it in the middle of the night. Like, no, she doesn't even notice he gets out of bed or anything. I mean, and he ends up a bloody mess.
Yeah.
For that matter, like, before she even wakes up.
It's kind of his fault. Like,
yeah, 100%.
He was snooping. He was obviously going to probably steal something if it was worthwhile. She, like, lets him off and is like, we're all trying to survive out here. It's like, okay, but also, you guys slept together and now he's trying to steal from you. You don't have to let him have a pass for that. That's crazy.
No, for sure. I just think the greater issue here is the concern of being found out, or, like,
yeah,
like, people hearing about this situation and making assumptions, or, like, or not even making assumptions, just finding out actual facts, because it would still be pretty bad for her.
Yeah. So she does, like, take care of him, but it is kind of like if he died, would it be so terrible? I guess in the way that this is his last location, that would be kind of bad if he disappeared.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's like it would be blamed on her for sure.
Yeah. She's in a pickle. Though, to be fair, Matthew hasn't said anything yet. Though it seems like he's not saying anything at all, so, you know.
He seems quite traumatized, honestly.
Understood, to be honest.
And especially with, like, Adelaide basically, like, paying him off and, like, rewriting the story for him.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
totally gaslit him.
Truly, like, 100%. I guess this is another place where it's, like, it is kind of... This could have gone a totally different way, right? If he's like, actually, like, Adelaide did this to me, or it's like something at Adelaide's house did it. Like, that could have been all it took to turn a community against her.
Yeah. I'm, like, trying to think of if he would be believed if he said something about it.
I don't see why they wouldn't believe him.
That a demon attacked him? Oh, I guess this is 1915. There's some God-fearing people here.
Like, yes, but also, I guess, like, depending on how much he shares. Yeah, that's a good point, right? Like, if you bring up, like, oh my God, like, it was literally, like, this weird creature demon thing. But at least to say, like, this happened at Adelaide's and, like, this is her fault, like, I think that would be enough, right?
Yeah, then we get, like, a lynch situation.
Yeah, that would be my concern for sure.
Yeah.
This is what I'm saying. Like, I understand, like, on the one hand, like, you know, I made my point that she seems to be welcomed, but I do think it's always, like, all it takes is one thing, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
So Adelaide, when she's at that dance, sees Mrs. Mudge there, and she's going by a totally different name. She kind of tries to call her out for it unsuccessfully at first, but this kind of comes back to bite. So in a couple of days after that, Mrs. Mudge and the kids come to her land, of course, threatening to steal from her and then kill her. It's extremely scary at first, but also the creature has already busted out, right? So the creature is in the home. It busted out while she was, man, I like totally skipped another thing too, which is that she like went and saved Grace and Sam from Mrs. Mudge and the family. When Mrs. Mudge comes to the house, it sounds like that only happened because she meant to show up to this house, right? As opposed to going over there. But that's when like the creature breaks out of the trunk and it's like living in the house now, which is bad news for the Mudges. So they, do they bust in the door or does she just open the door? I think she just opens the door and the creature comes out and attacks Mrs. Mudge. Once they realize what it is, the older two brothers run off on the horses and the creature learns how to fly.
Crazy.
Which I think is kind of one of the wilder parts of what happens with the creature. I think there's a couple of things about this section that I think are interesting. I think when Adelaide first uncovers that Mrs. Mudge is at the dance, it kind of reminds me of the same, like, I don't want to be found out energy from earlier on, where she's like finding out Mrs. Mudge, and obviously she does not want to be found out. I also think it's interesting that these kids are kind of described in monstrous ways, right? Like Adelaide even kind of directly connects them to the monster, where it's like Mrs. Mudge is in charge of these 4 kids and they're kind of her monster, whereas like Adelaide is maybe not in charge of the creature, but that's like her monster, and it does seem to actually, whether it's for her or not, it does defend her in a way during this scene.
Yeah, I remember from the beginning the youngest boy like had pushed somebody down a well.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh,
Crazy.
These are like little demons. I understand.
Yes.
And there was a brief moment of time between like what Adelaide has going on, what Grace has going on, and what Mudge had going on with these 4 kids. I was like, are they actually demons? Like, are all of these women shackled with like horrors that they cannot get rid of? Is that like the point of what's happening here? And then like 2 of the boys died and so did she. So I was like, maybe not for her, but
yeah. Yeah, because you kind of get the sense that may be true for Grace a little bit with something that's haunting her, but yeah, this is not the same.
Yeah.
But I don't know why. Like, I don't know. It feels like there'd be a reason for it, but I haven't gotten there yet. And now that Mrs. Mudge will never have like a here's why I did it kind of moment, right?
Yeah, I mean, if the point is just like white people are the evil, understood. And like the twist somehow becomes like the creature isn't actually like, you know, whatever, Frankenstein situation. Like the creature just needed a chance and to be raised right, whatever. Like it's not demonic just because it looks demonic type of situation.
Right.
That's a possibility because yeah, this entire family is terrible. Like they just go around and travel and kill people and steal their stuff and live in their house, and it's like, yeah, that's demonic shit right there. Like this demon, how many people has this demon killed? I don't know.
I don't know.
honestly.
Yeah. I just I don't understand them much. It's like I don't know, like how did they come to be this way? Like why did they come to Montana specifically for it? I don't know. Maybe I just don't understand what it's like to be in the situation that they're in, but they're so like vicious, right? And then they become
Hmm.
vengeful, right? Like they're like Joab is like, muches never forget. And it's like, "Oh my god, like you guys you kind of reap what you sow here." Like just doesn't make sense that they'd even be grudge holding people, but I guess they're also just weird. Like there's like like the whole well thing, and just the family behavior interaction is just kind of odd. Maybe I'm not supposed to understand them because they are so different, but maybe I'm also just not used to like because I don't think this is going to go beyond that for them. Like I think as much depth as the much as there's going to get is probably around there. So maybe I'm just used to like having it be like, oh, but they're more complex than that.
Right,
I
right.
guess there's a little bit of that too, though, because the mom dies and they're like, oh, the kids are going to be sad. But like, it's like kind of an off comment.
Yeah, I really think they're just. I think, interestingly enough, this book might do that. They're just evil because they're evil. It's the creature that's a little bit more nuanced here, which might kind of be the point of the book, you
Yeah.
know?
I mean, I don't mind that.
Yeah.
It kind of reminded me too. So, because I think, especially with their revenge, kind of, there's only two kids left that we're mostly hearing about Joab. Like, yeah, we're not going to see the last of them until they're dead, probably. It very much reminds me, there's this character in the DC universe, Queen of Fables, who shows up in the Harley Quinn cartoon, and her whole thing was like, or not her whole thing, but a major thing that she says in that show is you have to kill the whole bloodline, which is in reference to her enemies, because you can't let any of the offspring be raised for vengeance, and that's exactly what's happening here.
Very, like, Greek idea. Like, also in the Odyssey. I don't know if it's in the Iliad or the Odyssey. It's in the in-between, I guess. But, like, you kill all of the sons of Troy when you're taking down Troy, or they will grow up and they will avenge their father, and
Exactly.
that cycle will just continue on and on and on and on. That's why you throw a baby off a wall.
Oh god, yeah, yeah, and it's just crazy because in this one it's like literally Joab. They say he's like 12 years old and he's like already a problem. So
Yeah, there's like a whole chapter dedicated to like the brothers basically recovering, which was a very strange chapter because it felt like time was moving more than it was. Like, I thought we were doing some
yeah.
weird time skip chapter. And then Adelaide's like, it's been a week. And I'm like, oh, that's it?
It was weird. I mean, there was also some like backward time skip, right? Because we see him get the job. I think just time was a little bit weird there. This part of the book, it kind of reminded me of when I was trying to read Under the Dome and never finished. But like the beginning of that book, or actually, I would say not just the beginning. It was very much hopping around between characters. It almost felt like vignettes. I feel like the beginning of this part two, that we've gotten a few chapters of so far, has felt that way, where it's really hopping around among the different townspeople and peeking into what's going on in different areas. It's not so Adelaide focused yet at this point.
It would make sense if like the creature is out there and it attacks somebody or somebody else sees it, then it would make sense for us to kind of have that character perspective rather than just Adelaide's.
Yeah.
I don't know if I like it yet.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's probably trying to go somewhere, so we'll have to see where it's going
Yeah.
to understand it. But yeah, I don't know. I don't mind a little bit of a shift. So
Yeah. I like have a weird thing in my brain about like consistency where it's like if it's not doing this at a consistent rate or like in a way that like makes sense pattern wise, then I'm like it's weird. But like who cares, you know? Like asymmetry is fine. It doesn't really matter that much.
I think that's why it's labeled a new part, right? I guess we'll see like how consistent it is with itself, but I think like it's part two because it's gonna have like a different vibe to it, kind of like History of Wild Places, where part one was just like the detective story, but then the rest of the book was like actually the story, you know?
Yeah, what a throw. That was crazy.
So one of the last things that happens is that Adelaide mentions she wants to tell Grace more. I actually don't remember what word she used, but she wants to tell her something. She says, "I didn't come to Montana alone."
Yeah, and then that's where we leave it. So like, I guess first question is, do we think she's actually going to tell her?
It's a tough question because I don't see why she would say that unless she was planning on it, but it does seem kind of odd for her to make the choice now to do so, other than to like figure out Grace's secrets.
I think it's because Sam has just told her Grace's secret, which is like fine. It's kind of Sam's secret as well, but like,
Yeah,
she does now know something about Grace, and Grace isn't aware of that. So it kind of could feel like reciprocating that kind of vulnerability, I guess, by sharing a secret of her own. So I think it makes sense at this time. I don't know if it's the best decision because they're in public, but that's none of my business. I think the only thing that could possibly stop her from saying it is if something happens, right? Somebody interrupts. Like if Finn, for example, shows up because he wants to talk to Adelaide. That's something that could happen. I would feel like it would be cheap. I would not like it, but it's a possibility.
Honestly, I guess bouncing with that, I almost do think that's going to happen, but I don't think it's going to happen before she says enough to get Grace interested, right? I think she'll give her a little bit of something, and then, we'll get the interruption, but I think we'll loop back to it later. Like when they're back at their homes or something, and like maybe if we're lucky, that'll be for a reason. Like something will happen between these two scenes that will justify why it was good to hold that information back, if we're lucky. But that seems pretty likely. I do think it's going to have to come out at some point. Also, like, kind of in the vein of this story being about shame and maybe some thoughts about the creature having to do with that. Like, it would make sense at a certain point she's going to tell someone, right? Like, that's kind of her overcoming the shame. So I think it's a step that needs to happen.
That definitely makes sense, yeah. Do we actually want to just talk about the creature?
Yeah.
Who we've kind of not talked about at all?
We've dodged it.
It's kind of a pair with Adelaide, I guess is the best way to put it. It was dropped off when she was born, according to the Henry family. But the question is, like, why?
Right.
Why is it being delivered to the Henry family? Like, what did they do, I guess? Not necessarily that they have to deserve it. Bad things happen to good people all the time, I suppose, but...
Yeah, but this is literature.
I know.
I feel like there's going to be a reason.
Yeah. And of course, there is still that secret that the mother apparently kept that, quote unquote, got her killed, at least from Adelaide's perspective. So if it's not the creature, then it must have been something else.
Do you think it's not the creature, though?
I don't think so, because Adelaide was kind of raised knowing she could contain this creature. Like, her putting it in the trunk, her being, like, unable to be hurt by the creature, like all of that she's known, and seemingly she's known for a very long time. So I don't think that was like a last minute, she found that out and then her parents died because of it. Like I think she knew her entire life.
This is connecting to something I was going to say later down the line, but now it's relevant. So there's that apparition of Adelaide's mom, of Eleanor, or like ghost or whatever, that she talks to, and she's like, she questions why they went into the barn with the shotgun, which is, I guess, like alluding to like them maybe trying to kill the creature again, right? And I don't understand why she would ask that question if it wasn't connected to the secret that she's referring to, right? Like I don't know why she would be like, why did you decide to do that if she didn't know why they did, right? Like there had to be a reason why they suddenly decided we're confronting the creature again with a shotgun. So what happened? Like, what is the secret that the mom has that she's not saying?
Oh, I mean, it's possible they're connected. I have been thinking that there's like a scene that happens where the father is reading and Adelaide is doing her mom's hair, I think. And Adelaide is thinking she doesn't want to live and work and die in the same place. She wants to be a lone woman. Like she wants to make herself. She kind of has that thought, and then she feels like her mother has understood that. And in my head, if her mom understood that's what she wanted to do with her life, is it possible she and the father tried to kill the creature so that they could free Adelaide from this burden? Like, they tried to give her a gift. They tried to save her from doing this, right? Adelaide has been raised her entire life that sacrifices have to be made, especially by women. And the mom kind of, in a moment of understanding her daughter, is like, maybe not this time, though, right? Like, maybe if we can kill the creature and free her from this burden, she can go and do whatever she wants. And that's kind of what I'm thinking happened. Like, that's why they chose that night to try and kill it. And, like, Adelaide feels guilty because of that, because she's the one that wants to escape, basically, right? Like, it's her secret sin of the lone women, which is a pamphlet she's been hiding in the house. Like, that's the secret. She wants to be on her own, make her name for herself. Like, she doesn't want to just be a Henry living in California doing the same thing her parents did. but she's forced to, or she would have been forced to, because of this burden that arrived when she was born. And it's like, was it there because of her or because of something her parents did? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. This one's a little tougher because if it's not connected to, for me, if it's not connected to the event that happened just before they died, like, it's hard to say. Maybe we just don't have enough information to really make a good guess, but like, it's hard to say what it is.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really know much about her family at all. We do very much start the book with them being killed, basically, or them already dead, I guess is more accurate. And it seems like they had a good home life, but is that because Adelaide is grieving them? Like, we don't really know the bad parts of it in the way in which she might have felt exceedingly trapped, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And if they were keeping more secrets, what were they?
I guess we'll see. I guess we'll have to find out. Like, you know, like the reasoning behind why the creature is here and all this stuff. Like, I just hope it's well explained. Like, I hope we're going to see a lot more of the parents and not just a little bit in the second half. I want it to feel justified, you know?
It depends on, like, how symbolic the creature is, I guess, right? Like, if it's just a very vague symbolic thing, which it could be, then I don't know if we'll get much actual explanation for anything.
I guess that would be okay, honestly, because I'm thinking just like in the horror side of the genres, right? Like that would make sense for the creature to kind of just be representative of a thing that people are dealing with and not kind of have much of an origin story beyond that, right? So it makes sense with the way it's described, right? Like it's like the heaviest thing anyone has ever moved around, and like it's just always there and unkillable, and you know. It makes sense. You know, we've talked a lot about shame. It makes sense that this is like representative of shame. I also thought maybe it's like, I don't know, intergenerational trauma, like something about like families passing down issues from one generation to the next, and she's kind of stuck with it. So I think there's a few things that it could represent, but no matter what it is, like the fact that it shows up when she's born, like, and is so tied to her as a person, like, yeah, it might not have anything deeper.
Yeah. And it's also like, if this creature is supposed to be a Henry family problem, what happens after Adelaide dies? Like, she's not married. She doesn't have children. Like, there is no Henry family. It's just her. So what was the plan here?
Yeah, because I'm confused if the creature is tied to her life, right? Like, it got anxious when she, like, made it look like she was going to, like, cut her own throat. But is that because he's tied, like, or he, I gave it a gender, my goodness. Is that because the creature is tied to her and like is like, if you do that I'm gonna die, or is it just like, ooh, like if you do that there's blood for me to have, you know? Like what is the angle here?
It staying in the cabin kind of made me think, I've mentioned before, like it kind of grew up with her, and it's something they both knew. Like they have kind of been each other's constant in a weird way if they were kind of raised together, and so the creature kind of sticking around and protecting her, maybe, question mark. And it has weird thoughts about her in chapter 35. Weird in the sense where it's like, it refers to Adelaide as her, and it's like, don't think about her, don't think about her. Like, it obviously has thoughts about her, right? Like, in the way in which I think it is maybe not like soul linked in a weird way, but it knows her too much to not be around her, kind of. Whether that's because of magic or just because of anxiety, I don't know.
Yeah, I know, because I was like, is this the angle of their like the creature is like similar to a familiar for her, and that we just haven't gotten that much interaction between them for them to have developed in that way? Or it's just that like the creature literally is a part of her, or like a segment of her that's not within her, and so shares her like anxieties and thoughts maybe in some way, I don't know. Or it's just like it has decided to care about her and can't control that. There's a lot of different angles it could be.
Yeah. It also depends on how the creature was raised. Like, there's a weird line where breastfeeding gets mentioned.
Oh yeah.
So I'm like, how long did the Henrys try and raise this creature before putting it in the trunk? Like, did they actually try and raise it as if it was their child? Which is fine. But, like, what was the timeline of that event, right? Like,
but it's the moment that they get it injures someone, right? Like, they know from the bat that it's a little dangerous, and it's just this random creature. I was like, why didn't they manage to like kill it while it was smaller, you know, while it was also knew.
Yeah, they seemingly didn't try to kill it until, like, I guess this moment, really. Like, I don't know. But if they thought it was, like, a baby, a weird baby, would they try and kill it? Like, when did the baby turn into a curse? And when did they realize, like, it was a curse they couldn't get? Like, yeah, the timeline's a little weird.
I think there are other attempts to kill it, though, right?
I don't think so.
I at least thought it was referenced to, but I can't think of a specific thing. Because that's how I thought they knew, like, oh, like, this thing is impervious.
From my understanding of that line, Adelaide says that because of the fact that they try and shoot it this one time. Because I think she says they tried to shoot it with a gun once, and it turns out it's impervious to bullets. And so it's this one time they tried to do it.
Gotcha.
Is my understanding of the timeline. But, I mean, yeah, the opposite of that would be what? They tried to shoot it before and then did it again. Like, I don't think they would shoot it a second time if they understood it was impervious to bullets, so...
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, I was confused about that. Yeah, that makes sense. I was like, wait, why did they try to shoot it with a shotgun if they already know it doesn't, succumb to that? So, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it could just be as simple as it's a living thing and they don't want to kill it.
I don't know. It's caused them a lot of grief. It seems. I feel like at a certain point,
Has it like?
Yeah, I guess we really don't know. But just the fact that it lives in a trunk, I'm like, yeah, you're right. It could have just all come from this one moment. But that seems well prepared.
It's just we don't know enough information. Obviously, we'll probably get the parents again.
Yeah, I would expect.
So we've kind of talked about bits of, I guess, the main general what might be going on with a creatures. You can say, thing happening here, like, throughout, but we can, I guess, solidify it so it makes more sense. So basically, what do we think the creature is? I guess is the way to question this. Like, do we think it's actually just a creature? Or, as we've been mentioning, is it maybe symbolic for something a bit more broad? And same with Grace's, like, she has the ghost of her husband that kind of shows up, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently she killed that guy. I don't know why yet. I guess we'll figure it out.
I'm excited.
Yeah, so is that also kind of... I mean, it's another burden placed upon her, I guess, is a way to look at it. So, like, Is that the point of these things, to be burdens?
Yeah, I can't tell if it's just burden because, well, I guess it could be. Without getting too much back into the origin conversation, just acknowledging that it showed up at her birth, like, it could be burden that she's given the moment she's born, right? And with Grace, that means she doesn't gain the burden until she does something that feels burdensome, which would be the husband's ghost. So that could make sense. I think, I mentioned shame in general too. Like, I think it's also to be born and, like, be immediately given shame, which I kind of think her family does do to her. Yeah, so I think any of these things would make sense as being those. I don't think that matches Mrs. Mudge, of course. And we don't have anyone else as an example of something that's following them. So we're really just going to have to, like, take what Grace says about, if she says anything about her relationship with what she did to her husband, like, that's probably going to be the best giveaway of, like, really what the creature represents. I am happy to stick with it just being shame, especially because she frees him at some point and talks about, like, she uses the word freeing, I think, in reference to her shame. And is like, can I overcome shame? So those kind of matched up of, like, okay, like, the creature gets out. She kind of stops worrying about him. That's her overcoming shame. Her now having to address the creature with Grace and being like, actually, I didn't come here alone. That's redefining overcoming shame from being like, I'm just going to ignore it and let it go, and be like, no, I'm going to acknowledge it and take it for what it is. That's my thought.
Yeah, which I definitely think lines up with the way Adelaide has been, like, talking basically about herself this entire time. I was thinking, like, all lone women who might want to go down this path might have some kind of, like, demon, basically, or burden. Not even just something you do, which is what Grace does, but, like we've said, something placed upon you. I think for, like, and I'm going to say this as the whitest person in any room, there is, like, this idea of, like, the stereotypes of Black people where they're violent, right, and they're dangerous. And so Adelaide kind of having this dangerous demon creature attached to her, and that being the shame on her that follows her everywhere, like, it makes sense, I guess. It doesn't make as much sense when she came from an entirely Black community, but, like, that kind of, I guess, societal pressure or societal shame is what I'm thinking the demons could be.
Mm.
I don't know what that means for Grace. I guess it depends on why she killed her husband. We don't really know what that relationship was like, other than like the usual, she killed her husband, that is shame. Like there might be something more about her, which is also why I thought Mudge had her demons, because she was also possibly a lone woman, but she's just a con woman. We don't have to think about her.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess it just comes down to all whatever the shame is. Like it's not always there just because. How do I put this? We're not always fair to ourselves, right? So like the shame we feel like doesn't necessarily match the thing itself. Like maybe there's not a great reason for Adelaide to feel shame, especially if it was kind of just given to her by her family.
Mm-hmm.
But like let's say in Grace's case, like it was like, oh, like the husband was like abusive or something like that, you know, something where it's like she did it in a self-defense response, like doesn't mean that she's not going to walk around with some shame. So
yeah, that does make me wonder though, like if it's Adelaide's shame or if it's her mother's shame, because it showed up right when she was born.
Right.
Not that there's anything wrong with giving birth, but like if there's a secret as to the Henry family and like how Adelaide was born, and maybe like some family drama in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the question is though, like, do we actually think the demon and like the ghost are going to be symbolic of something, or do we think it'll just be there are creatures because there are creatures?
I don't think so. I don't think it's going to be that. I think it's going to be that they're symbolic of something. It's feeling, if this is really a horror book and it's feeling like that, like I think it's got to represent something.
Oh, interesting. I don't know if I'd agree with just because it's horror, it has to symbolize something, because there's some horror where there's nothing.
Sure, yeah.
But I will say I think this is thoughtful horror, so yeah, definitely symbolic of something. I don't know if it'll be confronted in the book, like, clearly.
Yeah, it might be implied, right?
It might just be a for us type of situation.
Or it's just, instead of, you know, we may have these theories about what it represents and nothing is confirmed, and then this is just, you know, critical thought instead of being theories.
Yeah.
The only other thing I have in the vein of theories is something I kind of already alluded to, which is, you know, in this part 2 of the book, we've changed to focusing on the townspeople a little bit more. And so my only thought there is that the creature's probably going to come back for them. I don't think we're switching to the town unless the creature's going to end up there.
That would make sense, because I think action-wise, like seeing what's happening, it's just too vast in Montana to be like in the houses. I feel like you wouldn't see what's happening very quickly. Mm-hmm. But like, yeah, settling in the town kind of allows things to pick up a little bit more. So that would make sense for like climax end of book type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess that's it. I feel like not that many crazy theories, but that's fine. We'll see what happens. If you have your own thoughts and theories, the Twitter is 5050_books. We also have the Goodreads, the YouTube, all in the description. And obviously, we'll just finish this book up next time for our Halloween season. And that's going to be it.
Bye-bye.